So for me, although Polkadot gets not so much press as sort of the other projects, for me, it is the long-term solution to scaling and all of the other issues that we see with Ethereum.
Joining me today is Chris Toufiq and Toufiq Rahman from Totem Network, which is supposed to be one of the most community-friendly crowd loans, which are trying to become a parachain on Polkadot. And they're going to share a lot of information about Totem. We're going to find out what they're all about, what do they have to offer, and why people should contribute to their crowd loan, which should happen in a couple of days, if I'm not mistaken. Chris, please welcome. And if you could please introduce yourself to the audience, and then Toufiq afterwards, just to give a bit of background, how you started and how you got to Totem to begin with.
Hi, I'm Chris Toufiq. Thanks very much for the introduction. I'm the founder of Totem Live Accounting. And well, my history is quite long actually in blockchain. I began in 2013. I founded an industry body, the Belgian Bitcoin Association, and through a number of projects that I was working with various other kind of Bitcoin enthusiasts at the time, sort of the idea of currency and how that's actually recorded into the accounts kind of came up, and then it began to be clear that there was a sort of an interesting problem to solve here. And I'm sure we're going to go into those details, but that's basically where sort of Totem came from, and we can talk about where it's going and what its vision is.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for that. And 2013, that's a long time. I mean, I hope you invested in Bitcoin at the beginning.
Well, I mean, this is a lot of where the funding has come from the sort of the development which has happened since really 2018, when we became involved with the Polkadot ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, because back then we had the ICO was in 2017 for Polkadot, wasn't it? So yes, you were in it very, very early. Cool, thank you. And Toufiq, do you want to share some background about yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Toufiq Rahman Chaudhary. I'm a software engineer and co-founder of Totem. I have studied in UK and worked in Australia as a software developer. And in 2019, Chris reached out to me for building the prototype of Totem, basically the UI. And that's when we started working. So it's been almost 3 years. Yeah.
Cool. So you're the guy behind the code.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Actually, we have a, in-app chat where people can reach out to us. So I have been active there a lot.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for sharing the background. And Chris, yeah, we're going to get straight into it then. So tell us about Totem. What is Totem and what are they trying to achieve? What problem are they trying to solve?
So I think when most people sort of think of accounting, they just think of what they already know. And accounting's been kind of established for years and years and years. The practices within accounting, even software that's been developed surrounding those practices, haven't really changed for centuries, really. And basically what accounting does is it sort of measures what's happening inside a business and allows people to sort of understand what's going on from a financial perspective. But it also sort of is connected to businesses outside of those accounts. In other words, you know, when you create an invoice and send it to your customer, that's an accounting function essentially. But also if you receive a purchase order and you're going to act on that purchase order, that's an accounting function. What most people also don't understand is that when you go into a shop and you receive a receipt, that receipt is part of the accounting function. So accounting actually touches everything that everybody does anywhere in the world at all times, in most cases, unless sort of no receipt takes place or it's just a cash transaction. But that's kind of how accounting has existed for a long time. The issue with that is that there's no connection between any of those parties. So if I issue an invoice in my accounting system, I then have to email it to my customer, for example, who then puts it in their own accounting system, and then they go to a banking application, for example, and they pay that invoice, and then the person who issued the invoice has to go to their banking application and get a statement and then connect the two together. And all of these are completely separate parts. there's very little automation. Even in sort of very large companies, you might think, oh, that's all automated, but it isn't. You still get large companies sending invoices by email to their customers, and they still have to do reconciliation between their bank accounts, in some cases manually, because they can't match up the amounts exactly with those invoices. And so this is all a completely broken system, and most people just think, oh yeah, here we are in, you know, sort of 2022, and all of this must be automated by now, but it isn't. And that's basically what Totem is setting out to solve. And we solve it in a very simple way, because there's a feature of what blockchain can do, which no other types of software can do. And that feature is basically that it can allow any two random parties to communicate pieces of information and arrive at a truth about what that information is. So you can think of it in terms of applying that to accounting. You could say, when I create my invoice, it should automatically be available to my customer immediately. There should be no delay. It should be there. I shouldn't have to take it out of my system and send it to them, and then for them to encode it in their system. That shouldn't happen. And with a blockchain, what you can do is you can communicate that information instantly and apply a certain set of rules that allow me, when I'm looking at that information, to see it as an invoice, and for my customer to see it as a purchase invoice, so something that they're buying. So they see it slightly differently, but it's the same information. And what we're doing is building sort of the underlying technology that allows that to happen in a seamless way, which effectively removes the whole need for having bookkeepers and accountants in the first place, which is why we say on our website, you know, Totem Accounting will basically take accounting off the to-do list for everyone.
That's interesting. Wow, that's a lot of information, but thank you for the background. And what about Polkadot? Like, why did you choose Polkadot to begin with? Why not Ethereum, for example, or Solana? Because institutional investors are focused on Solana. So why did you choose Polkadot?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, I've had a long history in this space. So I've kind of grown up understanding at a very profound level what the issues are with blockchains and just development in general. I've done the blockchain side of the development here, and I'm a technician by training. So I understood, for example, that there were issues with Bitcoin in terms of scalability. There were issues with Bitcoin in terms of usability as well. Those were attempted to be solved with Ethereum. And well, we've seen in the last few years that there are issues there as well with gas prices, and that affects usability as well. But there's a common factor here between sort of Ethereum and Polkadot, and that's Gavin Wood. Gavin, as probably I'm sure a lot of people already know this, that he wrote the original yellow paper for Ethereum and implemented the original client for Ethereum. So for him to sort of step away from that and say, oh, okay, I'm going to address the issues that I'm now aware of inside Ethereum and go and try to solve those in a different way, was kind of an important milestone. But also what he proposed, in my view, was the most correct way of solving these issues. And we could say that, you know, we look at other projects that are out there that may also have had connections to the Ethereum original development, but they're not the same as having the person who wrote the original client, for example, or wrote the original yellow paper for Ethereum. The person that did that is Gavin Wood. Obviously, he understands at a very deep level what the issues are, and he also understands how they could be solved. So for me, although Polkadot gets not so much press as sort of the other projects, for me, it is the long-term solution to scaling and all of the other issues that we see with Ethereum.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And we also have to remember that Gavin Wood is the creator of Solidity, the programming language which Ethereum was built on. So that's also another big point to consider with Gavin Wood.
Yes, yeah.
It just also makes him a very intelligent person, because creating a programming language, I'm sure any software developer can appreciate that is not something that your average developer can do. So yeah,
it's not trivial.
Yeah.
And you know, the scaling issues aren't trivial either. So to be able to sort of step away from that and move on is, I mean, sort of an important thing to consider. And it was for us when, for example, when I saw his presentation in October 2018, I think it was at the Web3 conference, which basically explained what Substrate was and how it was a framework for building blockchains.
Yeah.
I immediately knew that this was the way that blockchains had to be built going forwards. It just was obvious to anybody who had ever been in this space for any length of time that was the way to do it. And I think contrast that with other projects and other teams, and we see things like Solana, which get a lot of press and they get a lot of support, but fundamentally their system keeps breaking down, and it's breaking down because you've got people who are building that who have no experience, who've no history in blockchain development, who don't understand the issues that are present and just see it as, oh, well, we need to get this many transactions per second. But that's not the only aspect. And there are good reasons why, for example, Bitcoin originally had, a 10-minute confirmation time. There's good reasons why those decisions were made by Satoshi at the beginning. And those decisions are now sort of very well understood, and they play a part in decision making. It's not just about getting sort of 100,000 transactions per second or whatever it is that the other projects are sort of claiming to do. There are more fundamental aspects that need to be addressed as well in order to make sure that your blockchain is stable.
How does Totem actually operate? So you've got the software which you need to access. You need to set up an account, right? User profile, I believe, using your Polkadot.js wallet. But then you also need to upload documents there, if I'm not mistaken, KYC, or at least enter personal details. So what is the detail? What details do you need from people to actually set up a user profile? And also, how does the software actually operate? What is required of it?
So specifically, no, we don't require any of that actually. In the same way that if you would create a blockchain address for any blockchain, in fact, you don't require KYC information for that. Totem has made a policy of making sure that that's not a requirement for anything that we do. So the information, if it's stored, is stored locally and only available to you. So any private information is only available to you. If you share your identity with another party, all you're doing is in effect sharing an underlying blockchain wallet address. So your identity and everything about you, or whether you're accounting for a company or whatever, is kept private. It's very local to you. It's not sort of shared widely. So I think maybe Toufiq can explain a little bit more about that in terms of the front end side and the steps that you go through. But basically, there are two steps to create your identity on the Totem blockchain.
Yeah, basically only information user provides is just basically choosing their username, because we have a chatting mechanism where users can communicate with other users, as well as they can request their identity, share their identity, contact to us for support, and all sorts of users on the app. So they just need a user ID. So that's basically all they need to provide. But during the sign up process, all they do is select a user ID, and then they simply set a name for their blockchain wallet, which we call identity. Yeah, and that's basically the setup process for us.
And
so
what
it's
about
as simple as that? Yeah.
And what about the receipts and all this sort of accounting information? How does that all add into the software? Like, how does a user actually supply this information? Like, say if you're running a business and you need your accounting done, how would you running the business be supplying that information within Totem to automatically manage everything?
So each identity on the Totem network has a complete chart of accounts associated with it. This is probably the first time this has ever been sort of conceived or done. And what that means is, and this is going to be probably a little bit technical for most people from the accounting perspective, it means that sort of information about sort of assets that might be being transferred, and you can think of a sale as a transfer of assets between parties, are recorded against a blockchain identity. So they're not recorded against an individual or a person, but just a blockchain identity, so an address. But that information is available for people to look at going forward into the future. So like any blockchain, it stores the historical record of that information. But the personal information that, as we said, is kept locally on a person's local machine, allows us to populate information that is stored on the blockchain with other information that might be kind of relevant. So for example, just to give you a very basic example, in a normal circumstance, what you might say is, okay, I've got a receipt that has an address and a company name and a telephone number or whatever it is on that receipt. And so therefore that company has shared a piece of information with me that they're allowing me to see, because otherwise it would just be a list of products and a list of quantities and prices and the total amount. But they share a further piece of information. Now, if I wanted to put that receipt in my accounts, I would have to set them up as a supplier, and I'd have to enter all of that personal information. Now, the way we do it in Totem is different. We basically say that there is a blockchain identity that's associated with that receipt, but it doesn't automatically come with all of the private information, the address, telephone numbers, or whatever it is. And it's really up to the person who owns that identity to decide what information they share with me. But from my perspective, all I'm interested in is the quantities and the prices that I paid. I don't necessarily need to see all of the personal information of the other identity. I just need to see the things that are relevant to me. So a shop, we see it sort of being quite a simple process. I know that retail is going away and in future everything will be online, but in general, the process is that I would share my identity, which is just a blockchain address, with a retailer, and a retailer would share their identity, which is a blockchain address, with me. And that's all that we need to know. The rest of it is taken care of automatically. It's when that receipt is generated, it's posted to both the retailer's address that they've shared with me and my own address that I've shared with them. And that allows me to see that receipt and them to see that same receipt with a slightly different sort of view. So I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but that's the process that we have, is that we're not allowing by default shared private information. It's up to the individuals to decide what they share with the other parties.
Right, I understand.
And who they share it with. Yeah, I just added, and who they share it with. So yes, it's not like if they share, it's going to be shared with everyone. So they specifically choose who they share the details with.
Okay, fine, I understand. But my concern with this is that tax authorities may ask for a receipt showing the supplier information, showing that company where the money is coming from. So how would you actually manage to come around that if the supplier doesn't want to share the information, but you've got the receipt? How can you report that to the tax authorities?
Well, firstly, you have to think about Totem as an entirely different accounting system, something that's never really been sort of created before.
Right.
So if you create an identity on Totem, your enterprise is already global. It's a global corporation. You can think of it like that.
Right.
So which tax authority are you talking about at this point?
In various countries, like for example, in Spain, tax authorities require.
Well, we're talking about a global system. So is there a global government to which you're going to report your taxes to? So the initial view is that, okay, we're going to create a global system, and therefore the global rules for handling taxes they don't exist at this particular point in time. They literally don't exist.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about individual accounting within a specific jurisdiction,
yeah,
then you can provide a proof of this information. This information, you might say to your customer, okay, well, I need to know who you are because my tax authority wants to know who I'm dealing with. And that would be really up to the other party to decide whether they want to share that information with you or not. It does present a dilemma. I understand that. But if you want to play the game, it's fine. You want to play that game of sharing personal information and having to deal with that. That's one thing. But we're moving to a world which is global in the sense that cryptocurrencies are global. Cryptocurrencies don't have borders. Cryptocurrencies don't report to individual. They're not controlled by individual tax jurisdictions in any way whatsoever. So these kind of things are being challenged at sort of every level. If we look at, for example, the concept of a central bank digital currency, if Europe decided tomorrow that they were going to create a central bank digital currency, they would have these same questions to answer. Which tax jurisdiction is going to apply here, and how do we deal with the fact that centrally we're now issuing a currency that can be used across the whole, across all countries, and technically is recording transactions between parties, who now gets their fingers on that information for claiming taxes. And that's something that the authorities don't even realize yet at this particular point in time.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, it's something it's a new concept basically, which nobody's prepared for right now. So that's one of the challenges, I guess. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Now, can we move on and talk about the utility of the tokens that are required to operate the Totem software? So which tokens do you currently have created, and let's talk about their utility. Like how will they be operating? What will somebody like me want to do with those tokens? What will we be able to use them for?
Well, currently we have a testnet, which is called the Totem Accounting testnet, which has been operating since 2019, and that has a test set of currency that we use on that network in order to pay for transactions, and that was basically given away for free for all the users of that test network. And that enabled us to sort of start to consider how transactions should be measured and how they should be costed within the network itself. So basically, I think, sort of we started off with sort of a cryptocurrency with 0 decimal places, but we were able to say that 140 of those was the minimum transaction amount, and that was basically based on the byte size of a transaction. With parachains, it's a little bit more complicated. It is not just the byte size of the transaction. There are other aspects to consider, the weight of the transaction, etc. The purpose of the parachain network then is to establish the more realistic costs of running the Totem blockchain network. So it is utility in the sense that in order to execute a transaction, to have some information stored on the blockchain or to make a posting to your counterpart will consume an amount of CAPEX. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly how much that is, but I think it's something like about 1 million units if you ignore the decimal places per transaction. But we're going to see with this mechanism how that works and how that whether it's realistic to have that in the current sort of operating mode. I don't know if Toufiq wants to add anything to that.
Actually, in terms of utility, there will be things like, people will be able to settle their invoices using Totem. When we go into the mainnet, they will be able to, we'll have a marketplace where people will be able to if they want to choose it, they can trade goods and services. they can hire people, stuff like those things. We'll sort of have a marketplace where all those transactions will primarily be on, on our Totem token. So all these things will sort of add utility to the token itself. And in terms of the KAPEX, our parachain token, it will determine the number of Totem tokens that will be minted in our mainnet. So that's one of the core utility of this KAPEX token.
One thing I wanted to add about the utility of the token itself is that although it's an algorithmic stablecoin using a basket of currencies, as we said, to sort of determine the value, one thing that it does, which no other cryptocurrency does and probably couldn't do, is that the currency itself is what's known as a functional currency. And this is unique to accounting systems. And most people don't sort of understand what that is. So I'll try and be brief in explaining what a functional currency is. So if you run a business or you run a government or whatever it is, you need to determine an underlying currency against which all of your transactions are going to be mapped. So even if you were making transaction in Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other tokens, whatever it is, you would still have to translate that into a functional currency in order to produce a set of accounts. Now, Totem is unique because its token is not only just this algorithmic stablecoin, but it is the functional currency of the network. So there's no translation that's needed to be done. And this is the first time, possibly in history, that an accounting system has its own functional currency that can also be used as a transactional currency. And this is, as I said, it's completely unique. And what it means is that all the transactions that occur, even outside of the system, can be mapped to Totem as a functional currency and then mapped directly into the accounts. And this allows people who are producing accounts in any country to compare those set of accounts like for like without having to do any sort of conversion between US dollar or euro or yen or whatever it might be, so that we can have a sort of functional currency that's independent of all other currencies.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so that explains why it is so different than your typical USDT or USDC stablecoin.
Yeah.
And now about the utility, will staking also be possible?
This is something that we're considering, but we have to be very careful about this because obviously staking to support the collators implies that there would be the creation of new currency on the network. So in the early stages, what we're considering is just looking at how the transaction fee burn is going and whether new currency needs to be created on the network. Perhaps the amount of currency is being reduced too heavily, so we would need to balance that out. But it is something that we're considering. We can't make any promises on that, but it really depends on how the mechanisms go during the sort of parachain launch phase.
Now, with regards to funding, Chris, how are you going to manage that? Because we understand that a lot of projects, not only in the Polkadot ecosystem, but in most ecosystems, have venture capitalists or simply private investors, and sometimes they even conduct public sales. They do them for the simple reason of being able to continue development for a longer period of time and manage to hit the milestones on their roadmap. So how are you going to manage that part if you didn't receive any funding from private investors?
Well, it's true. We haven't received any funding from private investors up until now. And in fact, we view the pledge part of this is allowing the community to become kind of virtual VCs for us without having to go directly to VCs. So we're offering it directly to the community via the pledge mechanism. That's not to say that'll be the only way of funding development on Totem. Of course, the Live Accounting Association will also be granting other developers who can come in and build for us and build with us to build out Totem. So those levels of funding will be carried out in using the KAPEX currency itself. So it's really a combination of what we raise via the pledge and grants that may be granted to us or other teams who can help us grow the team and build out further.
Right. And you want to talk about the difference between the crowd loan and the pledge?
Yes. So they're one and the same, really. I mean, the pledge is not mandatory. You don't have to pledge funds if you participate in the crowd loan. But there is a difference in the exchange rate between what we give in terms of CAPEX for the crowd loan versus what we give as a base rate for the pledge. So the pledge is, as a base rate, 3 times more attractive, if you like, than the crowd loan. But you can't contribute to the pledge without contributing to the crowd loan. So it's not something that people can just sort of take advantage of and just go directly with the pledge. They actually have to participate in the crowd loan.
Yeah,
the reason for
that's
that
interesting.
The reason for that's pretty simple, is that the crowd loan is actually the thing that we want to focus on, and if the community want to help fund us beyond that, then that's what the pledge is for, so that they can sort of become community VCs, if you like. Yeah,
no, that's definitely a good idea. And there is one other project in the Polkadot ecosystem who are doing exactly the same thing as you're doing. Obviously, they haven't publicly announced it yet. Well, they have announced it in their Telegram group, but not because there is no crowd loan at the moment. They haven't mentioned it, in Twitter or anywhere else. But yeah, it's definitely a good idea, because it definitely stops whales from manipulating. I mean, you have to contribute to the crowd loan if you want to be part of this other sale. Now let's talk about the exchanges. So have you discussed with any cryptocurrency exchanges to support the Totem crowd loan? And if so, which ones, if you're allowed to say?
Well, I can't really say at this stage, but I've had an early stage meeting with a major exchange based in Europe that has done other crowd loan projects in the past. So I can't really say more than that. But
so is there definitely one exchange, or are we talking about multiple exchanges?
Well, we've reached out to multiple exchanges, but there's at least one that I think is probably the most important of those.
Okay, that sounds good. Right, so let's talk about KAPEX and Totem then. So 2,581,000 KAPEX tokens will be created or will be minted. I don't know if they've been minted yet. And how are you going to, I mean, if Totem is going to be the utility token, are you going to do a transfer across or a migration from KAPEX to Totem? So everyone that holds KAPEX will actually receive Totem on a 1-to-1 ratio, or how will that actually work?
So the Totem token is actually algorithmically stable token. So it has a sort of a fixed value, whereas the CAPEX will be determined. The value of the CAPEX will be determined by the market. So when you launch our parachain, we'll sort of do airdrop, and that airdrop will require a sort of conversion from Totem to CAPEX. So everyone who got rewards using our rewards campaigns, they will be able to convert their Totem token to CAPEX token at a set conversion ratio. We haven't decided the conversion ratio yet, but it will be similar to the US value at the moment we have.
Yeah, I should actually point out that I think what Toufiq meant there was the other way around. It's that the CAPEX token will be converted to the Totem token on our mainnet. And
no, I meant actually from going from testnet to the parachain. Okay. Yeah, okay. That's when Totem will be converted to CAPEX. And then eventually when you go to the mainnet, then CAPEX will, people will be basically burning CAPEX to claim their Totem token on our mainnet. So yeah, there is actually 3 chains, so people might get confused. First one is our testnet, which is totem.live currently. Then second one will be our parachain, which is CAPEX, and then eventually CAPEX, our eventual mainnet, which will be the Totem token again.
Now, I do have a question about that. This is actually coming from the community about the stability, algorithmically stable currency of Totem. So if you say a certain amount of Totem is worth, say, $100, what makes it actually worth $100? And also, how do you stop the market choosing a different value for Totem? One for Chris or Toufiq.
So that's most people are considering algorithmic stablecoins as being pegged to a fiat currency at this point. That's kind of most people's understanding of an algorithmic stablecoin. But there is an established algorithmic stablecoin, and that's called special drawing rights. And the mechanism and calculations for creating special drawing rights, which is issued by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is the same method that we would be using to establish the stablecoin value of Totem in our mainnet. So the way this works is essentially it takes a basket of all currencies. In this case, well, in the case of SDR, it takes a basket of 5 currencies, and it creates a value for SDR based on that basket of 5 currencies. But it doesn't mean that those 5 currencies actually exist in the basket. They're not an actual quantity of coins that exist. It's just a mathematic calculation that's done in order to establish the value of SDR. And what we're saying is that we're going to expand that, and we've done this already in our testnet. We're going to expand that to include all cryptocurrencies that we think are relevant in the marketplace, and all fiat currencies. And from that huge basket of currencies and assets, we'll be able to calculate a value for Totem. And that value will be established on chain. Now, there could be a market for that coin, and the market price could change, but it would always end up coming back to the value that's established on chain because of things that we know about that happen in the market, whereby if you see an opportunity at one price, you would buy it at that, but then at that point it would be pushing the price up, for example, and then it would basically reach the same price. You might be able to sort of have some discount on the markets, but eventually it would stabilize around the calculated price anyway.
Right. Okay.
By the way,
go ahead.
The basket Chris mentioned in our testnet, we have nearly 700 different tokens that is used to determine the price of the Totem token at the moment, and we'll probably add more in the future.
Cool. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Makes more sense, because I think that's where the confusion was about the pegging, like Chris was saying. So let's talk about the Crowdloan now. You've mentioned on the website that 55% of the total supply will be allocated to the Crowdloan, but not only the Crowdloan. Okay, so it's also going to the pledge. So the question is, what percentage is allocated to the Crowdloan, and what is the minimum amount of KAPEX tokens that a Crowdloan contributor could possibly get? Like,
so we got some criticism in our channels over the original calculation for this, because is felt to be sort of misleading that we said that 55% of the coins would be distributed to the community, and based on sort of recent activity within the parachain auctions, it was felt that a slot could be won with a lower number of contributions in the Crowdloan. So we've kind of looked at that again, and basically what we've said is that everything that all the coins that would be allocated at our hard cap, which was 568,000 coins, will now be distributed to all contributors to the Crowdloan, no matter what happens, whether we meet our soft cap or target cap. We will, as a base distribution, distribute everything from the hard cap.
Right. So if there's a small amount of contributions in terms of DOT, then each person that contributed will receive a larger amount of KAPEX because you haven't met your hard cap, right? Or is there a maximum amount of reward that you're going to pay anyway?
I would say there's a minimum amount of reward.
Or sorry, a minimum,
which is the hard cap allocation. On
no,
top of
sorry,
that,
I meant the other way around. I meant, is there a maximum amount of KAPEX you're going to pay if, say, only 100,000 DOT gets contributed and you happen to win the auction?
There's no maximum in that sense,
Okay.
because it will go to whatever the amount of CAPEX
Okay, so
is
it does get
allocated to the
divided then. It does get divided. It's like the
Yes.
total amount of CAPEX you have allocated will get divided by the number of dot contributions, and then so
Yes.
they'll get more CAPEX.
Yes.
The less contributions you'd have if you were to win. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. But on top of that, of course, they still get bonuses. So if we do reach a soft cap or our target caps, there are bonuses that are paid on top of their original contribution. So whichever way there is, there's kind of a minimum that would be paid out if we don't reach the soft cap. If we do reach the soft cap, which we've reduced drastically, and we think it's now very realistic that we would be able to reach the soft cap, then at least the users will get a 10% bonus on top of that, and then a further 10% if they reach the target cap, which again has been reduced down by more than 4 million dots. So we think we've made the sort of proposition a lot better. So to answer the question specifically in percentage terms, I think it's about a minimum of 25 or 26% that the participants will get, the rest being available within the pledge itself.
Right. Okay, I understand.
And bonuses and the referral program.
Right. I think that makes it clear then. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Chris or Toufiq, about Totem and anything exciting coming up?
I guess we have been thinking about building an OTC exchange on our Totem Live. So that's something we'll be working on after we get our parachain up and running. Obviously, we have already the tasks module and track keeping module. On top of that, we are planning on adding a marketplace, which I mentioned moments ago. So the marketplace would be something where people would be able to trade services and goods, basically whatever they want, and they'll be able to pay with Totem. And we might as well eventually add other tokens like Bitcoin or Ethereum where they can pay with. Would it be basically the same principle as OTC, but on the chain? So yeah.
With the added fact that everything's accounted for, so you don't have to go to an accountant to sort out the stuff afterwards.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And we're looking forward to the Crowdloan, which is due to begin on which day exactly?
28th April.
28th. Okay, so just 3 days to go. Cool. Yeah. I'd like to thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate you and Toufiq for joining and for sharing this information. So yeah, if you are interested in Totem, please check out the links in the description of this video. And don't forget to join their Telegram group. You'll get a lot of help there as well, or follow them on Twitter. Thank you for watching. Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.